Hi guys, I'm back from the boat show in Hamburg, which was a lot of fun, but I'm itching to get started recording the next video here aboard Athena. So let's head up and get started. It's Wednesday afternoon and I've only just gotten back from work. Now, I don't really have a lot on my to-do list for tonight. In fact, I've only got two things I need to figure out tonight. One is how many light fixtures I want to put in the headliner here aboard Athena. And the second thing is, I'd like to get your guys' suggestions on where and how I should mount these speakers for my stereo. First things first though, it looks like my heater here has run out of juice, so I better top that off to get the heat going in here. Fortunately, doing that is really easy. It's just a matter of pulling out this tank here and then bringing it outside. Up until now, I've been using one of these doohickeys to transfer diesel from the big canister to the small tank. But this thing is pretty horrible. It's complicated and it's slow, and in fact this has already broken, although I've only been using it for about a week. Then I remembered that I had one of these lying around. And in fact, it was one of you guys that recommended I picked up one of these. So yeah, I figured I'd give this a try. This thing was a heck of a lot faster, that's for sure. Almost too fast for that small tank. But for something like transferring 20 liters of diesel from a jerry can into the main tank, this is going to be really useful. So a big thank you to whomever recommended I pick up this. In a few minutes it's going to be nice and toasty in here, so let's move on to the first item on my to-do list for tonight, and that is to figure out how much light to put in here in the main saloon. Not too long ago I showed you this light fixture that I was considering using. The big upside to this is that you can replace the bulb in here, and as LEDs continue to improve, I think this is a really useful feature. The big downside to this particular model here is that it's so big that I'd have to modify the headliner for this to be able to fit. Since then I've found these, which also have a removable bulb. They're small enough that they'll fit in the existing headliner without me modifying it, and as an added bonus, these are actually more affordable. Not all that surprisingly, I think I'm going to stick with these new ones here, but I still need to figure out how many of these to put up in order to get the right amount of light. And I figured the easiest way of doing that would just be to tape some of these in place. There we go, 3 of these taped in place. Remember, I haven't decided on which LEDs to order yet, so I've got 3 different LEDs in there. Of course, that means when I turn them on, there's going to be a slight difference in color temperature and brightness. Now, let's kill the work lights and see what this looks like. Ta-da! 3 LEDs. Now, on camera, this is going to look a little bit dark, but that's just because I set the exposure when I had my big work lights on. And the color of the light is also going to look a little bit more yellowishy on camera than it is in real life. To the naked eye, this looks perfect. So I've got 3 LEDs here, and judging by the amount of light, I think I'm going to put another 3 on the starboard side of the saloon, then maybe 2 here in the middle, 1 directly aft of this hatch up here, and then maybe 2 in the companionway. That brings the total for the saloon up to 11. But looking at my own hands here, I can see the shadows here, and that might get annoying while working in the galley. So might want to put some up here too. Let's say 4, and 4 on the other side. That brings us up to 19, and maybe add a few extras just to be sure that I have enough. So let's say I order 25. Having 19 LEDs here in the saloon might sound like a lot, but remember, for about 6 months out of the year, the sun sets pretty dang early here in Denmark, and it gets dark, and I want to make sure that I have enough light in here. And remember, the LEDs will be dimmable, so I can control the amount of light that way. Now, in all likelihood, I'm going to end up using these for the 3 cabins and the 2 heads also, so ordering 25 to start out, well, it seems like a good idea. The second item on my little to-do list for tonight is to turn to the great hive mind for some advice. Some advice about speaker placement. I want to add 2 speakers here in the saloon so that I can listen to music and stuff like that. Now, the speakers I'm considering using are these guys, and that's from Bose, and I believe they're called the 131 Marine speakers. Don't worry about the black bit under it, they're just ordinary flush mount marine speakers. But the big issue here is placement. In the galley, there's absolutely nowhere I can place those speakers. There's just not enough room. On the main bulkhead, on the other hand, there's plenty of space. I could mount a speaker over here and one over here, but the big issue here is what's behind the bulkhead, because on the port side there's the forward head, and on the starboard side, well, there's the forward cabin. Looking aft, there's again plenty of room. I could mount a speaker up here, but then if we turn to the starboard side of the boat, that's where the aft head is located, so yeah, I can't really cut a big hole and mount that thing there either. On the starboard side of the boat, there's not really a lot of room either. I mean, I could theoretically mount them on the inside of this, but that would mean the speakers would be facing each other, which isn't really ideal. And I can't really build something to have them pointing out this way because that would block the port light, and other than that, there's just not a lot of room. I know we're drifting dangerously close to first world problems here, but I just cannot decide on what to do about those speakers. So if you've got any kind of advice, I'd love to hear it, whether it's about speaker placement or maybe some other speakers that I should consider. Just go ahead and share it as a comment down below. And that wraps up what I wanted to take care of here aboard Athena tonight, but I'll be back in just a few days. Good morning, guys. It is Saturday morning and it is an absolutely gorgeous morning. I'm just about to leave Obelix to head over to Athena. It's a comfortable -4 degrees Celsius, but as you can see, there's absolutely no wind, and later today the temperatures are supposed to rise above freezing. In other words, the perfect day for installing the rest of the new Portlights aboard Athena. Oh, it's nice and toasty in here. In the last video I mentioned that the curvature of some of the Portlights doesn't match the curvature of the cabin top. I wrote an email to the place where I purchased the Portlights and I got a very prompt reply. Mind you, that was on a Sunday evening. Most impressive. Apparently when using these types of Portlights, that's perfectly okay. You're just supposed to use the screws to pull in the frame so that it matches the curvature of the cabin top. No doubt that is going to be terrifying, but let's give it a go. I've already put in 2 of the new Portlights. The first one you saw right behind me in the galley. The second one is this one, which sits in between the aft head and the saloon. The next one I'm going to put in is this one, and as you can see, I've already drilled the holes, so the next step is to see if the inner frame matches up with the holes I've drilled. These are the inner parts of the frame and they go right here. And looking at the holes, it looks like I'm good. I might need to trim this one just a tiny bit. To avoid any confusion, I have marked the top and the bottom part of the frame. The next step is to add these little doohickeys. These are threaded on the inside, and this is what the screws are going to grab onto, and it's just a matter of popping them in. Like that. I've gone ahead and put in all of them, but before moving on, I'm just going to secure each of them with a tiny bit of masking tape. In case I drop the frame, I don't want these to go flying everywhere. Now seems like it would be an excellent time for a tiny disclaimer. I've only put in this type of Portlight 2 times before in my life. The first time was in the galley and the second time was in the aft head. So this will be my 3rd attempt. I might be doing something horribly wrong here. If I do, I'm sure some of you guys will let me know down in the comments. If I do make a mistake, the good thing is that I'm using a non-setting sealant, so removing the Portlights and rebedding them will be super easy. With that all-important disclaimer out of the way, let's move on. I've already removed the old sealant that was on here, and now it's just a matter of giving it a quick wipe down with some acetone. I've cleaned up the outside part, and I've also given this a quick wipe down with some acetone, so now I think it's time we get some sealant on there. And another benefit to using a butyl-based non-setting sealant is that you've basically got unlimited working time. I mean, this does form a skin, but it's not something that happens immediately. As for how much to apply of this sealant, well, it's not really that important because any squeeze out is going to be super easy to clean up, so just be sure to get enough on there. With the Portlight now covered in delicious goop, let's get this in place. Before I can go outside and secure the frame to the cabin top, I need to put the inner frames in place. And again, I'm just going to use a little bit of masking tape to make sure it doesn't pop out. Now we get to my least favorite part about installing this type of port light, and that's fiddling around with these tiny screws. Now I've secured these 4 screws here, and that's roughly the middle of the port light. That was one of the tips I got from the place where I've purchased these port lights. If there's a gap on each side, you start from the middle and work your way out. So this is the final screw in this port light. And there we go. As you might be able to see on camera, I've got a bit of squeeze out all the way around the port light, which is perfect. Now I'm just gonna scrape off the bulk of the excess sealant here, and then I'm gonna use some mineral spirits to clean up the rest of it. That got rid of most of the excess sealant, but as you can see, it doesn't look very neat right now. But let me show you a magic trick. With a bit of mineral spirits, this stuff just wipes right off. Of course, that probably also means you don't want to get a lot of mineral spirits in between the frame and the cabin tub, but it's certainly a big advantage that cleanup is so easy. That is a pretty spiffy looking port light, if I do say so myself. All that's left to do now is to remove all of the masking tape. Ta-da! That is the starboard side done. Of course, this port light here behind me, the one I've just put in, isn't one of the curved port lights. So now for the terrifying part, the 3 forward port lights. I think what I'll do is I'll fiddle around with one of them and see how that goes, and then I'll bring you guys along for the second one, just because I'd really like to be focused on not screwing up on that first port light.
2 hours later.
I've put in the first of the 3 forward port lights, the starboard one, that's this one over here. And you know what? It wasn't all that bad. When you think about bending glass, it feels terrifying, but when doing it, it's actually not all that bad. I don't know how those are constructed. It might be fun to take a closer look. But anywho, I'll show you on this port light right here. I'm just going to get all of the prep work out of the way. I've drilled all of the holes and I've put sealant on the port light, and I've loosely tightened the first 2 screws here, just as I showed you on the first port light. Because the cabin tub is curved, there's a decent sized gap here, and there's a gap about the same size on the other side. What I was told to do was to put in the middle screws and then work my way out from there, so that I put in these 2, then these 2, then these 2, and so on. And that worked out really well on that first port light, and I'm sure the same is going to be the case for this one. I'm going to see if I can capture some sort of time lapse of this, but I don't know how that's going to turn out, so we'll see. Ta-da! As you can see, the port light is now nice and flush with the cabin tub. That worked out really well, but sadly, as you might be able to tell, I'm kind of running out of daylight, so I think what I'll do is I'll focus on getting the prep work for the last port light out of the way, and then I'll see you guys here back aboard Athena bright and early tomorrow morning. Good morning, guys! Today is Sunday, and I'm ready to mount that last port light. The middle port light right here is the last port light I need to install, and it's not like the others. For one, this is perspex instead of glass because it's got more of a curve to it, and also on this port light the gap is in the middle of the port light instead of on the ends like on the 2 other curved port lights from yesterday. So this will be interesting. This is the gap I just mentioned. There's about 12 millimeters of space here. As you can see, the port light sits nice and flush out here, and then in the middle there's a gap. What I was told to do was to start from the outside and then work my way in. The very first thought that popped into my mind upon hearing that was, hey, wait a minute, that'll never work, because if both of the ends are fixed, how am I supposed to pull in the middle? I replied that to the manufacturer, and they told me to just loosely tighten the screws on each end and then slowly work my way towards the middle. And hey, they have got a lot more experience working with these port lights than I do, so let's give this a go. I've applied sealant to the frame and I've loosely threaded on the screws here. These aren't tight, they're just threaded on there. So the plan is to go along and pull in the frame and then replace these slightly too long screws with the correct length screws. Ta-da! It definitely took a while to fiddle around with all of those tiny screws to pull in the frame, but now the Portlight is nice and flush with the cabin top, so yay! The very last thing that's left to do is to remove the protective film on the inside of the Portlight. I'm not going to lie, that was incredibly satisfying. Of course, I can't very well end this video without doing a panning shot to show off the new Portlights. And I gotta say, I think they look absolutely stunning. For one, you can actually see out through them, which you couldn't really through the old Portlights because they're hazed over and cracked. And also the new non-corroded frames does a lot to lift the appearance here inside the boat, making Athena almost seem like a new boat. I am so relieved to finally have the new Portlights installed. Next week the temperature's going to jump up to around 5 or 8 degrees Celsius and we're going to get a fair bit of rain, so I got them installed just in time. A big thank you to Southeast Marine Windows for their awesome customer support. In a couple of weeks I'm going to order an additional 2 Portlights for Athena, so great customer service definitely pays off. Before ending this video I'm going to try something new, and this is something I'm going to do every once in a while from now on. I'm going to mention another YouTube channel that I've grown fond of. Chances are you guys are already familiar with channels like Life is Like Sailing, Drake Paragon and Rand Sailing, so I thought it might be fun to mention a channel that you might not be familiar with. And this week that channel is Cruising the Cut. David is living aboard and cruising his narrowboat full time. His videos are first rate and the content is awesome. If you're curious about what it's like living aboard a narrowboat, and personally I find it very intriguing the sort of subtle differences there are between living aboard a sailboat and a narrowboat, you should definitely head over and check out Cruising the Cut. There's a link in the description and I'll also pop out one of those newfangled cards. Okay guys, that is going to be it for this weekend. I'll be back next weekend. Until then, see you! Yukul and I hope you've enjoyed this video. For more videos like it, click subscribe. Please consider leaving a comment and a thumbs up. It really helps me a lot and I appreciate your support very much. If you're new to the channel, please check out the introduction playlist. If you want to watch every single video I've ever published, check out the playlist named All Videos. It contains every single video listed in chronological order.